Chapter 1. The Gathering Shadows. Evelyn Sinclair tugged her scarf tighter around her neck as she stepped off the boat that had brought her across the misty waters of Loch Drummond. The lake, still as glass, reflected the overcast sky, giving it an ominous steel-gray hue. Looming ahead was Lochmoor Academy, a dark silhouette against the rugged landscape of the Scottish Highlands. The academy's stone walls, worn by centuries of rain and wind, rose like a fortress, encircled by dense, ancient woods that seemed to hold secrets within their shadows. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of wet earth and pine, a stark contrast to the polluted air of London she had left behind. Lochmoor was a world unto itself, and its isolation had a way of drawing Evelyn back year after year. There was something intoxicating about its exclusivity, its deep-rooted traditions, and the thrill of power that pulsed through its hallowed halls. Behind her, the other students disembarked from various sleek cars and boats, most of them accompanied by personal assistants or bodyguards who carried their luggage. Amidst them, Evelyn spotted Nico Santoro, the enigmatic artist from Milan. He stood apart, his olive-toned skin and curly black hair framing a face set in perpetual contemplation, as if he were already dissecting the landscape for his next sketch. "Evelyn," he greeted her with a nod, his voice low and tinged with a soft Italian accent. "Another year." "Indeed," she replied, glancing around at the gathering crowd. "The last one, hopefully, before we escape this place. Though I imagine life outside Lochmoor might seem rather dull by comparison." Nico shrugged. "It's all a matter of perspective. Here, we have mysteries and legends. Out there, we just have life." He turned to gaze at the school. "Speaking of mysteries, did you hear? Professor McLeod is missing." Evelyn arched an eyebrow, feigning mild surprise. She had heard whispers on the boat ride over, rumors that had swirled around the missing professor, a beloved figure among the students for his charismatic lectures on Scottish folklore. "Missing? Are you sure?" Nico nodded, his expression clouded. "He left for the summer, but no one's heard from him since. The school's keeping quiet about it, of course. They're calling it a sabbatical, but it seems off." Before Evelyn could respond, a soft, deliberate voice interrupted their conversation. "He was last seen near the loch," said Akira Takahashi, appearing beside them with a quiet grace. Her dark eyes held a sharp, discerning glint, and her movements were measured, almost predatory. "My father told me. He has contacts within the embassy, and they've been alerted to McLeod's disappearance." "So, the rumors are true," Evelyn murmured. "Interesting." Their attention was drawn to the main gates, where a commotion had broken out. Liam Connolly, a tall young man with rugged features and an air of confidence, was attempting to enter the grounds when one of the security guards blocked his path. Dressed in plain clothes, he was a stark contrast to the opulent attire of the other students. "Don't you know who I am?" Liam's tone held a hint of irritation as he brushed off the guard's hand. "I'm a student here, same as the rest of them." The guard hesitated, glancing at a list on his clipboard. "My apologies, Mr. Connolly. We weren't informed about any scholarship entries this term." "Scholarship or not, I have every right to be here." Liam pushed past him, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. Evelyn watched him with mild amusement. She knew of him, of course. Everyone did. Liam was the groundskeeper's son, and his presence at Lochmoor was a testament to his academic prowess, not his wealth. He was an outsider, but one who had earned a place within these walls through sheer determination. "New blood," Nico remarked, raising an eyebrow. "Should be interesting." Evelyn's gaze lingered on Liam as he strode toward the main building, his steps sure and unyielding. "Let's see how long he lasts," she replied, a slight smile playing at her lips. As the students filed through the gates, the towering figure of Headmistress Abernathy appeared on the steps. She was a severe woman, her thin frame draped in a black cloak that billowed in the wind. Her eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the crowd with an intensity that seemed to bore into each student's soul. "Welcome back to Lochmoor Academy," she intoned, her voice carrying over the courtyard. "This year, as always, we expect nothing less than excellence from each of you. Lochmoor is a place of tradition, of discipline, and of honor. Remember that your actions reflect upon this institution, and we do not tolerate anything that might tarnish its reputation." Her gaze landed briefly on Liam, a flicker of disdain crossing her features before she moved on. Now, return to your houses. Classes begin tomorrow, and I expect you all to conduct yourselves with the decorum befitting your station." The students began to disperse, murmurs rippling through the crowd as they made their way to their respective dormitories. Evelyn exchanged a glance with Nico and Akira, a silent understanding passing between them. This year was already shaping up to be different, darker, perhaps, than any year before. As they walked, a familiar figure joined them. Isabella Moreno, her warm brown eyes alight with curiosity, matched their pace. "Did you hear about Professor McLeod?" Evelyn smirked. "Seems the whole school has heard, and it's only the first day back." Isabella looked troubled. "I spoke to my father this morning. He mentioned that there was an investigation, a quiet one, of course, but still. They're searching the Loch, but they found nothing. It's as if he vanished into thin air." They walked in silence, the weight of Isabella's words settling over them. Evelyn's thoughts raced, her mind already piecing together the fragments of a story that had only just begun. Something was amiss, and she intended to find out what. As they reached the entrance of their dormitory, Nico paused, glancing back at the Loch shrouded in mist. "There are secrets here, hidden in the shadows," he said softly. "We'd be wise to tread carefully." Evelyn followed his gaze, a chill prickling down her spine. She had always loved Lochmoor's dark allure, but this time it felt different, dangerous even. The shadows seemed to reach out, as if inviting her into their depths. And though she prided herself on being fearless, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something far more sinister than they could imagine. "Then we'll tread carefully," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we will uncover the truth." And with that, they stepped into the darkness, the weight of the coming mystery pressing down on them like the cold Highland fog. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Walls. The next morning, Lochmoor Academy was blanketed in a thin layer of mist, casting an eerie glow across the grounds as the students shuffled to their first classes. Evelyn moved through the familiar hallways, her footsteps echoing off the stone walls adorned with oil paintings of Lochmoor's past headmasters and benefactors. Their eyes seemed to follow her as she walked, each expression severe, as though they were silently judging the students who passed below. She made her way to Professor McLeod's old classroom, tucked away in the oldest wing of the academy. It was now locked, with a small sign posted on the door: "Class canceled until further notice." Evelyn paused, running her fingers over the cold iron handle. There was something unsettling about an empty classroom, especially one that had been a hub of life and energy only months ago. A soft rustle came from behind her, and she turned to see Liam standing a few feet away. He glanced at the sign, a curious expression on his face. "Checking out the professor's old haunt?" he asked, crossing his arms. "I thought you might be too posh for such morbid curiosities." Evelyn smirked, unfazed. "Curiosity knows no class, Mr. Connolly. Besides, you're here too." Liam shrugged. "Figured I'd see what all the fuss was about. This place has a way of making people disappear, you know. I've heard the stories." She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Stories? Do tell." He leaned against the stone wall, his voice low. "My father's worked here for years, and he's always heard whispers about strange things happening at Lochmoor. There was a teacher decades ago who vanished during a storm. Some say he wandered too close to the loch at night and never came back. Then there's the tale of a student who ran off into the woods and was found weeks later, babbling nonsense about shadowy figures." Evelyn listened intently, her pulse quickening. "And you think Professor McLeod is just another chapter in Lochmoor's ghost stories?" Liam's gaze hardened. "I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in secrets, and this school has more than its fair share." The sound of footsteps interrupted them, and they turned to see Headmistress Abernathy striding down the hallway, her sharp eyes narrowing as she spotted them lingering by the classroom door. "Miss Sinclair, Mr. Connolly," she said curtly, her tone clipped. "Loitering is hardly becoming of Lochmoor students. I suggest you find your way to class." Evelyn straightened, offering a placid smile. "Of course, Headmistress, just reminiscing about Professor McLeod's lectures. He was quite a favorite." The headmistress's expression remained impassive, though her lips thinned slightly. "Professor McLeod has taken a leave of absence. There's no need to concern yourselves with such matters." She glanced at Liam, her gaze cold. I trust that you, Mr. Connolly, will remember your place here. Lochmoor has high standards, and we expect every student to uphold them. Liam nodded, but Evelyn could see the flash of irritation in his eyes. As the headmistress continued down the corridor, he muttered under his breath, "She looks at me like I'm dirt under her shoe." "She looks at everyone that way," Evelyn replied, though she knew there was a different level of disdain in Abernathy's gaze when it came to students like Liam. Lochmoor was exclusive, and to many here, a scholarship student was an anomaly. They parted ways, each heading to their respective classes, but Evelyn couldn't shake the sense that something was lurking beneath the surface of Professor McLeod's disappearance. She found herself distracted throughout her morning lessons, her mind drifting back to the stories Liam had told her. Later that day, during lunch, Evelyn, Nico, Akira, and Isabella gathered in a small alcove in the library, a spot they'd unofficially claimed as their own since their first year. The library was one of the oldest parts of the school, its wooden shelves stacked high with leather-bound tomes that smelled of must and history. Dust motes floated in the beams of light streaming through the stained glass windows, creating a serene atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the tension bubbling among them. "So," Isabella began, leaning in conspiratorially, "has anyone heard anything more about McLeod?" Evelyn shook her head. "Nothing substantial, just rumors and a lot of vague statements from the headmistress." Nico glanced around to make sure they were alone before speaking. "I took a look at some of his sketches in the art room. He often sketched the grounds, and I found something odd. His last few drawings were of the Loch, but there's a dark figure in the background. It's faint, almost a shadow, but it's there." Akira raised an eyebrow. "A shadow? Do you think it could mean something?" Nico nodded. "McLeod was meticulous. He didn't add things without purpose. I think he was trying to tell us something. Maybe he knew more about the disappearances than he let on." Evelyn's mind raced as she pieced together the fragments of information. What if he was investigating? The legends, the old stories. It's possible he stumbled upon something he wasn't meant to find. Liam appeared at that moment, sliding into the alcove with an air of urgency. "You'll want to hear this," he said, glancing around the table. "I overheard two teachers talking near the staff room. They were whispering about something called the Order of the Loch. Ever heard of it?" Akira looked thoughtful. "The Order of the Loch? It sounds like one of those secret societies you'd hear about in a novel." Liam nodded. "Apparently it's real." The teachers sounded worried. They said that the Order is older than Lochmoor itself, a group dedicated to preserving certain traditions, dangerous ones. A shiver ran through Evelyn. "Are you saying McLeod's disappearance could be connected to this order?" "Exactly," Liam replied. "And it sounds like they don't take kindly to outsiders digging into their affairs." Isabella glanced over her shoulder, lowering her voice. "If this order is real, and they're as dangerous as you say, maybe we should be careful. We're dealing with something far bigger than a missing professor." Nico crossed his arms, his face set in a determined expression. "But we can't ignore it. Lochmoor has been hiding secrets for centuries. If this order is still active, then we need to find out what they're doing and why they're targeting people like McLeod." Evelyn felt a surge of resolve. "Agreed. If there's an order, we'll find them, and we'll uncover whatever they're hiding." Their eyes met in silent accord, the weight of their decision heavy upon them. Each of them was aware of the risks, but the lure of the mystery, the thrill of uncovering the truth, was too enticing to resist. They were no longer just students. They were now investigators, bound together by a shared purpose that would carry them into the very heart of Lochmoor's darkest secrets. As they left the library, the shadows seemed to deepen, the ancient stones of the school pressing in around them as if watching, waiting. They had taken their first step into the unknown, and the path that lay before them was one filled with danger, deception, and perhaps even death. The Order of the Loch had kept its secrets for centuries, but Evelyn and her friends were determined to shine a light on the darkness. And as they walked through the mist-shrouded corridors of Lochmoor Academy, they felt a presence following them, an invisible force that seemed to whisper their names. A warning, perhaps, or an invitation to uncover the truth. Chapter 3. Into the Depths. Evelyn and her friends spent the following days combing through the school's library, a labyrinth of dusty bookshelves and forgotten tomes. Despite their research, little was to be found on the Order of the Loch. It was as if the very history of the Order had been erased from Lochmoor's archives, an unsettling fact that only fueled their determination to uncover the truth. One afternoon, while they were poring over a pile of particularly ancient texts, Liam approached them with a worn, leather-bound journal in his hands. He had found it in a hidden compartment behind a bookshelf in one of the library's darkest corners. The journal was old, its pages yellowed and fragile, and the name scrawled on the inside cover read, A. Stewart, 1878. Evelyn raised an eyebrow as she took the journal, carefully flipping through the pages. A. Stewart? Could that be Alexander Stewart, one of Lochmoor's founding headmasters? Liam nodded. That's my guess. If anyone knew about the order, it would have been him. They gathered around as Evelyn began to read aloud. The journal entries were cryptic, recounting strange occurrences that Alexander Stewart had witnessed during his tenure at the academy. His writing detailed late-night rituals held by a clandestine group, deep in the woods near the Loch, as well as chilling descriptions of sacrifices and oaths taken under the cover of darkness. Nico shivered. Sacrifices? Are you saying they actually harmed people? Evelyn shook her head, her voice wavering. It sounds like it. Stewart believed these rituals were meant to protect Lochmoor, to ensure that the Academy's success and reputation remained untarnished. He wrote that the Order of the Loch held immense power, and that even the headmasters feared them. Akira frowned, crossing her arms. But what could they be protecting Lochmoor from? And why would they resort to such extremes? Liam tapped the page where Evelyn had left off. Read that part. Stewart mentions something about the Watchers in the Loch and the price they demand. Isabella leaned closer, her expression wary. Watchers in the Loch? Like creatures? Evelyn's eyes scanned the page, her heart racing. It's hard to say, but Stewart seemed convinced that something was living in the Loch, something that required offerings. He describes the Order's purpose as keeping this force appeased, lest it bring ruin to the Academy and everyone associated with it. A heavy silence settled over the group as they absorbed Stewart's words. The air around them felt colder, as if the very walls of the library had come alive, breathing with the ancient secrets they'd just unearthed. That evening, they decided to explore the Loch themselves, hoping to find any traces of the Order's activities. Dressed in dark clothing and carrying flashlights, they set out under the cover of night. The grounds were eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of gravel beneath their feet as they made their way toward the forest. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an otherworldly glow on the mist that swirled around them. Evelyn led the way, her flashlight beams slicing through the dense fog. Behind her, Nico, Akira, Liam, and Isabella moved cautiously, their footsteps almost silent. The woods around Loch Drummond were ancient, filled with twisted trees that seemed to reach out like skeletal hands, clawing at the night sky. As they neared the water's edge, they spotted a strange arrangement of stones laid out in a circular formation, half hidden by tall reeds. A sense of foreboding settled over them as they approached, and Evelyn could feel her skin prickling with unease. "What is this?" Isabella whispered, her eyes wide. Nico crouched down, examining the stones. "It looks like some sort of ritual site. These markings." He traced a finger over one of the stones, revealing intricate carvings that resembled runes. "They're old, maybe Celtic. Whoever did this knew what they were doing." Akira held up her flashlight, illuminating a nearby tree. Strange symbols had been etched into the bark, that was faintly visible beneath a layer of moss. It's the same symbol Stewart described in his journal, the sigil of the Order. "We're definitely in the right place." Liam pointed to a worn path leading deeper into the forest. "If there are more sites like this, they'd be further in. The Loch is known for its caves and underground passages. I've explored some of them with my father. There's a cave up ahead by the water that's large enough to hold a gathering." They followed the path, moving quietly as the forest seemed to close in around them. The trees grew thicker, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. The air grew colder, and a faint, metallic scent hung heavy, mingling with the damp smell of the earth. They reached the entrance to the cave. its mouth yawning open like a black void. Liam took the lead, shining his flashlight into the darkness. The cave was deep, with jagged walls that looked as though they had been carved by ancient hands. As they moved inside, their footsteps echoed, and the faint drip of water could be heard somewhere further in. Suddenly, Nico halted, his flashlight fixed on something near the cave wall. A crude altar had been set up, draped in tattered cloth and surrounded by melted candles. In the center lay a small bowl, its contents dark and dried, as though it had held blood. Evelyn's heart pounded as she took in the scene. This isn't just some abandoned site. Someone has been here recently. Akira's voice was barely a whisper. Do you think it was the order? A low, rumbling sound echoed from deeper within the cave, making them all freeze. It was unlike anything they'd ever heard, a guttural, inhuman noise that seemed to resonate through the stone itself. They exchanged frightened glances, and Evelyn could see the fear in her friend's eyes. We should go, Isabella said, her voice trembling. Whatever that is, it doesn't want us here. Just as they turned to leave, the ground beneath them shook and the sound grew louder, reverberating through their bones. They stumbled back, barely able to keep their footing as the cave seemed to come alive around them. The shadows on the walls shifted, taking on strange, almost humanoid forms that moved with unnatural grace. Liam grabbed Evelyn's arm, his grip firm. Run! They dashed out of the cave, the shadows seeming to follow them, flitting across the walls and ground. The cold air bit at their faces as they tore through the forest, branches snagging their clothes as they raced toward the academy. Behind them, the cave entrance loomed, and Evelyn could swear she saw something moving just beyond the edge of the light. A dark figure watching them, its eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. They burst out of the trees, panting and shaken, and collapsed on the grass just outside the academy grounds. The night was still, the loch reflecting the moon's pale light as if nothing had happened. Nico caught his breath, his face pale. Whatever that was, it wasn't human. Evelyn stared back at the forest, a chill creeping up her spine. She knew they had just encountered something ancient, something that had dwelled in the shadows of Lochmoor long before the academy had been built. The Order of the Loch was not just a group of people. It was a force, a presence that protected something dark and powerful. As they lay on the ground, hearts still racing, Evelyn realized that they had barely scratched the surface of the mystery. Whatever secrets Lochmoor held, they were far more dangerous than she had anticipated. But turning back was no longer an option. She was more determined than ever to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. And she knew, deep down, that the real danger was only beginning. Chapter 4: Shadows of the Past. The morning after their harrowing night at the Loch, the group gathered in Evelyn's dorm room, where the tension was as thick as the mist outside. They were all visibly shaken, and the reality of what they had encountered was still sinking in. Evelyn paced the room, her mind racing. We need to figure out what we saw last night. Those shadows, they weren't natural. Nico sat by the window, staring out toward the Loch. I've seen a lot of things worth painting, but nothing like that. Those shapes, those sounds, they felt like they were alive. Akira crossed her arms, leaning against the wall. And if the order is connected to whatever that was, then it's no wonder Professor McLeod disappeared. He might have stumbled upon something he wasn't supposed to find. Liam, seated on the edge of Evelyn's bed, looked around at the others. There's a chance McLeod left behind some clues, though. He was the history teacher. He would have known where to hide things. He spent a lot of time in the East Wing, in the old archives. Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. Then that's where we'll look. The archives hold records dating back to Lochmoor's founding. If the Order has been around that long, we might find something in the older documents. Isabella looked uneasy. But if the headmistress or anyone else in authority finds out, we'll be expelled. This school doesn't tolerate students digging into things they shouldn't. Evelyn gave a faint smile. Expulsion would be the least of our worries if we uncover the Order's secrets. But we've come too far to stop now. The group exchanged glances, each of them steeling themselves for the task ahead. They knew the risks, but the allure of unraveling the mystery was too strong to ignore. That night, under the cover of darkness, they slipped out of their dorms and made their way toward the East Wing. The East Wing was a part of Lochmoor that few students ever visited. Its corridors were narrow, lined with ancient tapestries that depicted scenes from Scottish folklore, battles, mystical creatures, and solemn gatherings under moonlit skies. The air was damp, and the smell of mildew clung to the walls, as though the past itself was seeping into the present. They reached the door to the archives, a heavy wooden portal reinforced with iron bars. Nico produced a small set of lockpicks from his pocket, glancing at the others with a mischievous grin. Growing up around artists isn't the only thing my parents taught me. Within moments, the lock clicked, and they slipped inside, closing the door behind them. The room was vast, its walls lined with rows of shelves that reached all the way to the ceiling. Dusty ledgers, faded maps, and crumbling books lay scattered across tables, their pages filled with handwritten accounts of Lochmoor's storied history. They split up, each heading to a different section of the archives. Evelyn pulled a book from one of the shelves, the leather cover cracked and worn. It was a ledger of student records from the late 1800s, listing names, dates, and disciplinary actions. She flipped through the pages, looking for anything out of the ordinary. A few minutes later, Akira called them over, holding an ancient scroll. "Look at this," she whispered, unrolling it carefully on a nearby table. The scroll was covered in faded symbols and a language none of them recognized. But what caught their attention was a sketch, a drawing of the Loch, with dark, shadowy figures lurking beneath its surface. "Do you think these symbols have something to do with the Order?" Isabella asked, tracing a finger over the strange writing. Liam leaned closer, studying the symbols. "My father told me about an old Scottish dialect used by some of the Highland clans. It looks similar, but not quite. This could be an older version, something tied to the ancient Picts." Nico examined the sketch. "Look here." He pointed to a series of markings around the figures in the loch, each symbol arranged in a circular pattern. "It almost looks like a ritual, a binding maybe, something to contain whatever these entities are." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. So the Order isn't just protecting Lochmoor from an outside threat. They're trying to keep something within the loch itself. Liam nodded. "The Watchers, as Stuart called them. The Order might believe that if these entities are released, they'll destroy the Academy, or worse." As they continued searching, they stumbled upon a leather-bound journal tucked into a corner shelf. It was MacLeod's, unmistakably, with his neat handwriting filling the pages. Evelyn opened it, and they gathered around, reading the entries by the light of their flashlights. July 13th. "The Order has warned me to stop my investigations. They claim that my curiosity endangers not only me but the students. I cannot in good conscience ignore what I've uncovered. The shadows in the loch are not mere legends. They are bound by ancient magic, and it is the Order's duty to maintain that bond. I fear they are growing restless. Tonight I will visit the loch once more. I must understand." The next entry was hastily scrawled, the letters uneven and smeared with what looked like dried mud. July 14th. "They followed me. I heard them in the water, whispering. I saw their eyes, glowing beneath the surface. I now understand the Order's fear, but I cannot stay silent. I have hidden what I found in the old chapel. If anyone reads this, beware of the Order. They will stop at nothing to protect their secrets." A heavy silence fell over the group as they absorbed the weight of MacLeod's words. "The old chapel," Nico whispered. "It's been abandoned for decades. No one ever goes there anymore." Evelyn's eyes narrowed with determination. "Then that's where we'll go next." The following night, they gathered their courage and set off once again, moving quickly and quietly toward the chapel on the edge of the Academy grounds. The chapel, a small stone building with broken windows and a crumbling facade, looked as though it hadn't been touched in years. Ivy snaked up the walls, and the wooden door creaked ominously as they pushed it open. Inside, the chapel was shrouded in darkness, save for a few beams of moonlight filtering through the broken windows. Dust swirled in the air, and the smell of damp stone and decay filled their lungs. They spread out, searching the pews, the altar, and the narrow aisles for any sign of what MacLeod might have hidden. It was Liam who found it, tucked behind a loose stone at the base of the altar, a small weathered box covered in strange runes. He pried it open, revealing a bundle of papers and a small vial filled with a dark, viscous liquid. Evelyn unfolded the papers, her hands shaking as she read the first page. It was a map detailing the various ritual sites around Lochmoor, each one marked with the same symbol they had seen in the cave. The other papers were notes detailing spells and incantations in a language they didn't recognize. This must be what MacLeod found, Akira said, her voice hushed. Proof of the Order's activities. As they examined the vial, Nico frowned. What do you think this is? Liam's face grew pale. I've seen something like that before. My father once told me about an old Highland potion said to connect the drinker with spirits. It's dangerous, though. Many people have gone mad after drinking it. Evelyn stared at the vial, feeling the weight of the decision before them. If they used it, they might be able to understand the forces lurking beneath the loch, but the risk was undeniable. We have to decide, she said, looking around at her friends. Do we continue? Do we risk everything to uncover the truth? They each looked at one another, the shadows in the chapel pressing in on them, as though the very walls were listening. They knew that whatever they chose, there would be no turning back. The loch held secrets that had been buried for centuries, and the Order would stop at nothing to keep them hidden. Evelyn took a deep breath, her mind made up. We've come this far. We drink, we learn, and we find out what lies beneath Lochmoor. Together. One by one, they nodded, their faces set with determination and fear. And as the first drops of the potion touched their lips, they felt a cold, otherworldly presence wash over them, connecting them to the ancient, unfathomable darkness of Lochmoor's past. In that moment, they realized they were no longer just students uncovering a mystery. They were part of something far older and more powerful than they had ever imagined. And the Watchers in the Loch were waiting. Chapter 5. Visions in the Mist. As the bitter liquid coursed through their veins, the group felt an intense cold spread through their bodies, as though they were being submerged in the icy waters of Loch Drummond. Their surroundings blurred, and they heard a faint humming sound, like whispers on the wind. Each of them swayed, feeling the pull of something ancient and powerful, dragging them away from the chapel and into a realm between worlds. Evelyn blinked, finding herself standing alone in a dense fog that obscured everything beyond a few feet. She could barely make out shapes moving in the mist, figures gliding silently through the haze, their faces expressionless and eyes hollow. Her heart pounded as one of them turned toward her, reaching out a skeletal hand, its gaze penetrating as though it could see directly into her soul. She stumbled back, feeling the presence of her friends at her side. They were all together now, each one visibly shaken, yet anchored by their collective fear and determination. Nico clutched her arm, his face pale. Did you see them too? Evelyn nodded, struggling to steady her breathing. Yes, we're not alone here. The fog shifted, parting slightly to reveal the loch, its surface black and ominous. Strange shadows moved beneath the water, rippling just out of sight, as though something large and restless was waiting below. They stepped forward, each drawn to the water's edge by an inexplicable force. A voice echoed across the mist, faint and distorted, but unmistakably familiar. It was Professor MacLeod. "Help me," the voice pleaded, its tone filled with desperation. "They're holding me here in the depths, the Order's ritual. It binds us all." Evelyn's head swam with confusion. "MacLeod? Is he trapped here?" Akira took a step closer to the water, her eyes fixed on the dark surface. "If he's alive, he's trapped in this place, caught between worlds. The Order must have used these rituals to bind him, just like they bind whatever is in the loch." Suddenly, the ground trembled, and the shadows beneath the water surged upward, forming a figure, a twisted, spectral shape with eyes that glowed an unnatural, ghostly green. It loomed over them, towering and dark, exuding a cold that seeped into their bones. Isabella gasped, clutching Nico's hand. "What is that?" The figure spoke, its voice a blend of many, as though countless souls were trapped within it. "You trespass upon sacred ground. The loch is ours. Leave now, or suffer the fate of those who came before." Evelyn straightened, summoning her courage. "We came to find answers. The Order of the Loch has held this place in fear for too long. We won't leave until we understand what you are." The spectral figure laughed, a hollow, chilling sound that echoed through the mist. "You think you can understand us? We were here long before Lochmoor was built. The order serves us, binds us to this place with their rituals and offerings, and those who defy the order pay with their lives. The shadows in the mist swirled, growing denser, pressing in around them. Liam looked at Evelyn, his face set with determination. We have to break the order's hold. If we don't, more people will disappear, just like McLeod. Evelyn nodded. But how? The order's rituals are ancient. We'll need to disrupt them somehow, to weaken their grip on whatever this is. As they spoke, the mist began to clear, and they found themselves standing on the loch's shore once more, the spectral figure fading into the shadows beneath the water. The presence lingered, though, a dark, oppressive weight that seemed to watch their every move. They knew that whatever they had seen was a warning, a sign that the order's influence extended far beyond the physical world. Back at the academy, they gathered in Evelyn's room once again, discussing their next steps. They were exhausted, yet their resolve was stronger than ever. We need to disrupt the order's rituals, Akira said, her voice steady. If they're using those symbols and rituals to bind the creatures in the loch, then removing or destroying them might break the bond. Liam nodded. And I think I know where they hold their rituals. There's a place deeper in the woods, a circle of ancient stones that I stumbled upon a few years ago. My father warned me to stay away, but I think it might be where they perform their ceremonies. Evelyn looked around at her friends, a sense of unity solidifying among them. They were in this together, and they would face whatever dangers lay ahead. Then that's where we go. We'll disrupt the symbols, break the circle, and put an end to this once and for all. Isabella's face softened, her gaze filled with worry. But what if we're wrong? What if we only make things worse? Evelyn placed a hand on her shoulder. We can't let fear hold us back. We've come too far. The order has terrorized this place for generations. It's time someone stood up to them. The group spent the rest of the night preparing, gathering supplies, flashlights, ropes, and a few tools they thought might help in breaking the symbols. Each of them knew that they were risking everything, but they were bound together by a shared purpose. Lochmoor's dark legacy would not end with them. The following night, they set off into the forest, moving quickly and silently. The woods were shrouded in darkness, the trees twisted and gnarled, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out for them as they passed. The wind whispered through the branches, carrying with it faint echoes of laughter and whispered warnings, as though the spirits of the forest were watching, waiting. They reached the stone circle Liam had described, a clearing surrounded by massive standing stones covered in ancient runes. The ground within the circle was barren, as though no life could take root there, and the air was thick with an oppressive, unnatural cold. Nico approached one of the stones, examining the runes etched into its surface. These symbols, they're different from the ones we saw in the chapel, more intricate, like they're part of a larger spell. Akira took out a small hammer and chisel they had brought with them. Then we destroy them. If these runes are holding the creatures in the loch, breaking them might sever the connection. One by one, they set to work, chiseling away at the runes, breaking the ancient symbols that had held Lochmoor in its grip for centuries. As they worked, the wind began to howl, and the shadows around them grew darker, closing in like a shroud. The ground trembled, and a low, guttural sound echoed from the loch, as though the creatures below were awakening, sensing the weakening of their bonds. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness at the edge of the clearing. Headmistress Abernathy stood there, her face twisted with rage, her eyes cold and fierce. "Stop!" she commanded, her voice reverberating through the night. "You have no idea what you're doing. The Order has kept Lochmoor safe for generations. By breaking these bonds, you doom us all." Evelyn stepped forward, unflinching. "Safe? You mean controlled. You've sacrificed students, teachers, anyone who threatened your power. We won't let you continue this cycle of fear." Abernathy's expression hardened. "You naive children. The Watchers in the Loch demand sacrifices. Without them, the creatures will break free, and they will destroy everything in their path. You cannot begin to understand the forces at work here." Liam's voice cut through the tension. "We don't need to understand. We only need to end this." With a final swing of the chisel, he shattered the last symbol on the central stone. The air around them erupted with a deafening roar. and the shadows in the loch surged upward, breaking free of their ancient chains. The earth shook beneath them, and a blinding light burst from the stones, enveloping the clearing in a fierce glow. Abernathy cried out, her voice lost in the chaos as the light swallowed her, dissolving the shadows and breaking the bonds that had held the creatures captive. The ground beneath them steadied, and the light faded, leaving them standing alone in the clearing, the stones reduced to rubble. For a moment, there was only silence, broken by the distant sounds of the forest, returning to life. The presence they had felt in the loch was gone, its power dissipated, and the air felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted from Lochmoor's soul. Evelyn looked around at her friends, their faces filled with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. They had done it. They had broken the Order's hold, freeing Lochmoor from its dark legacy. As they walked back to the academy, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow across the loch. They knew that they would never be the same, but they had uncovered the truth, and in doing so, they had brought an end to the darkness that had haunted Lochmoor for generations. The Watchers were gone, their power broken, and Lochmoor was free at last. And as they crossed the threshold of the academy, they knew that their lives would be forever bound by the secrets they had shared and the darkness they had faced together. Chapter 6: Aftermath and New Beginnings. The sun rose over Lochmoor Academy, casting long shadows across the mist-laden grounds as Evelyn and her friends returned to the main building. The events of the past few days had left them weary, yet there was a sense of lightness in the air, a feeling that the weight of centuries had finally been lifted from the ancient stone walls. As they entered the school, students were beginning to gather for breakfast, oblivious to the night's harrowing events. Evelyn looked around, seeing Lochmoor in a new light. Without the oppressive influence of the Order, the academy seemed almost welcoming, its grandeur no longer marred by the secrets lurking in its shadows. They met later that morning in the library, where they had first resolved to uncover the truth. Each of them was still shaken by what they had seen, but they were united, bound by their shared ordeal. Liam broke the silence. So, what now? We've exposed the Order and broken the bonds, but there's still so much we don't know. About the creatures, about MacLeod, about Abernathy. Nico nodded, his expression somber. The creatures in the loch may be gone, but they've left a mark. Lochmoor's history is scarred by what the Order did, and people need to know the truth. Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes filled with determination. We can't change the past, but we can ensure that no one else falls victim to the same darkness. We need to tell our story, and we need to honor those who suffered because of the Order's cruelty. MacLeod and all the others who were lost. Just then, the door to the library creaked open, and an unexpected figure stepped inside. It was Professor Alden, one of the oldest teachers at Lochmoor, and a quiet, unassuming man who had always kept to himself. He looked at them with a mixture of sadness and relief. I know what you've done, he said, his voice heavy. You've ended something that has cast a shadow over Lochmoor for longer than any of you can imagine. Evelyn and the others exchanged glances, surprised by his words. You knew about the Order? Evelyn asked. Professor Alden nodded, taking a seat across from them. I've known for many years, but the Order's influence was powerful. They controlled the headmasters, the staff, anyone who might have spoken out against them. I stayed silent, fearing for my life and the lives of the students. But now, thanks to you, the Order is no more. Akira's eyes narrowed. Then why didn't you help us? You could have told us what we Unistrength were dealing with. Alden looked down, guilt evident in his expression. I wanted to, but I was too afraid. And I knew that anyone who went against the Order would be silenced, one way or another. I had seen it happen before. I watched colleagues disappear, students fall ill with inexplicable ailments. The Order was relentless in its pursuit of control, but now it's over. And you freed Lochmoor. Isabella leaned forward, a soft smile of understanding crossing her face. We did what we had to do, and now Lochmoor can finally be a place of learning, free from fear. Professor Alden nodded, a spark of hope in his eyes. Indeed, there will be challenges, of course. The Academy's reputation will need to be rebuilt, and the truth will have to be shared carefully. But with your bravery, you've given Lochmoor a chance to start anew. They talked for a while longer, discussing how they might preserve the Academy's history without glorifying its dark past. Together, they made a pact to protect Lochmoor and ensure that its future would not repeat the mistakes of the past. In the weeks that followed, the Academy underwent significant changes. Headmistress Abernathy was quietly dismissed, and Professor Alden took over as interim headmaster, determined to guide Lochmoor into a new era. The Order's influence was purged from the school, and old rituals and practices that had held students in fear were dismantled. Evelyn, Nico, Akira, Liam, and Isabella became local legends, their actions known only to a select few within the Academy. The five of them had forged an unbreakable bond, and they knew that their friendship would endure beyond the walls of Lochmoor. They each took solace in knowing that they had made a difference, that they had brought an end to the horrors that had plagued the school for centuries. Evelyn found herself drawn more deeply into her studies, inspired by the history they had uncovered. She began writing a detailed account of their experiences, determined to keep the story alive so that future generations would understand the importance of courage and the price of silence. Nico returned to his art, creating a series of paintings that captured the dark beauty of Loch Drummond and the haunting presence they had encountered there. His work became renowned, admired not only for its technical skill, but for the emotions it conveyed: fear, bravery, and the quiet resilience of those who had faced unimaginable darkness. Akira, ever practical, delved into the ancient texts they had uncovered, becoming an unofficial historian for the Academy. She cataloged every document they had found, preserving the knowledge of the Order's rituals and symbols as a reminder of what should never be repeated. Liam, with his deep connection to the land, took on a role as a guide for new students, sharing the tales of Lochmoor's past while ensuring that its future remained bright. He found peace in knowing that the Loch, now free from the Order's influence, could once again be a place of quiet beauty rather than fear. And Isabella, the heart of their group, dedicated herself to creating a sense of unity within the Academy. She helped to organize events and gatherings, bringing students from different backgrounds together and fostering a sense of camaraderie that Lochmoor had long been missing. One crisp autumn morning, as the first hints of frost covered the ground, Evelyn and her friends gathered one last time by the shore of Loch Drummond. They stood in silence, gazing out over the water, each of them reflecting on the journey they had shared. Isabella broke the silence, smiling softly. "We did it. We changed Lochmoor, and maybe we changed ourselves too." Liam chuckled. "Speak for yourself. I still feel like the same stubborn kid who grew up wandering these grounds, but I'll admit, I see things differently now." Akira nodded, her expression thoughtful. "We're part of this place now, and I think in some way it's a part of us. The things we went through, they'll stay with us, even when we leave." Nico looked at each of them, his eyes bright with a mixture of pride and sadness. "This is only the beginning. We've survived something no one else could understand, and no matter where we go, we'll always have this bond." Evelyn smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart that dispelled the last remnants of fear. "We've faced the darkness together, and we've come out stronger. Whatever lies ahead, we'll face it with the same courage. We owe that to each other, and to everyone who came before us." They stood together, their hands intertwined, as the sun rose over Loch Drummond, illuminating the water with a soft, golden light. The shadows that had once haunted them had faded, and in their place, a new sense of hope filled the air. Lochmoor Academy would carry on, its legacy forever changed by the bravery of 5 young students who had dared to uncover its deepest secrets. And as they left the loch behind, each of them knew that they were walking toward a brighter future, bound together by the memories of a place where they had learned not only about the past, but about themselves. They were no longer just students, they were survivors, and they were free. Epilogue: The Legacy of Lochmoor. Years passed and Lochmoor Academy transformed, shedding its dark past and embracing a new identity. The stories of Evelyn, Nico, Akira, Liam, and Isabella became a quiet legend within the Academy, whispered among students who felt a thrill in knowing that their school had once been home to a powerful secret, and to 5 brave individuals who had faced it head-on. Evelyn returned to Lochmoor one misty morning, now as a published historian and lecturer. Her book on the Academy's history had become a sensation, blending factual research with the mystery and intrigue of the Academy's hidden past. She had taken great care to honor the story of the Order without glorifying its darkness, her account a warning about the dangers of unchecked power. The air was crisp as Evelyn strolled along the familiar pathways, her heels clicking softly on the gravel. She paused by the loch, gazing out at the still waters, which shimmered under a pale morning sun. For all its beauty, she could still feel the weight of memories here, the presence of those shadows, the echo of whispers on the wind. Yet there was peace, too, a serenity that had settled over the landscape since the Order's bonds were broken. Evelyn heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Liam approaching, a warm smile on his face. He looked much the same, though his shoulders had broadened, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence that spoke of years spent close to the land. "Evelyn," he greeted, his voice carrying the familiar Scottish lilt she remembered. "Back again to visit your old haunt?" She laughed, a sound filled with nostalgia. "I couldn't resist. Lochmoor has a way of calling me back. Besides, I wanted to see how things have changed." Liam nodded, glancing around. "They have. The students here are different now. They know the history, of course, but they also know that Lochmoor is a place of strength, not fear, thanks to you and to all of us." They walked together along the shore, catching up on their lives. Liam had stayed on at Lochmoor, first as a groundskeeper and then as a guide, ensuring that each new generation of students learned to respect the land and the stories it held. He had even started a history club, encouraging students to research the Academy's past and share its tales. "I'll admit," Liam said, looking at Evelyn with a grin, "I still tell the students a ghost story or two, but I always remind them that ghosts don't control us. We honor them, we remember them, but we don't let them define us." Evelyn smiled, feeling a rush of gratitude for her friend. "You've kept Lochmoor's spirit alive in the best way, Liam. I can't think of anyone better to carry on its legacy." As they walked back toward the academy, they were joined by Akira, now a professor of ancient languages at a renowned university, and Nico, whose paintings had gained international acclaim. Akira had used her knowledge to translate ancient texts, uncovering details of forgotten cultures, while Nico had continued to capture the eerie beauty of Lochmoor and the Scottish Highlands, sharing its haunting allure with the world. They greeted one another with warm embraces, each marveling at how life had taken them in such different directions, yet had ultimately brought them back together. Their shared experiences had forged an unbreakable bond, one that no amount of time or distance could weaken. Isabella soon joined them, a diplomat like her father, known for her skill in negotiation and conflict resolution. She had traveled the world, but she often thought of Lochmoor, drawing strength from the challenges they had faced here together. She embraced her friends, a smile lighting up her face as they reminisced about their time at the academy. They spent the afternoon exploring their old haunts, visiting the chapel, the East Wing, and the library, where they had first uncovered MacLeod's journal. The building held no more fear for them, only a sense of familiarity and pride in knowing they had helped to shape its future. As evening fell, they gathered one last time by the loch, standing side by side as they watched the sun dip below the horizon. The loch glowed with a warm golden light, its surface calm and unbroken. Evelyn raised her glass, a soft smile on her face. "To Lochmoor," she said, "to the place that tested us, that taught us, and that brought us together, and to the future we built because of it." They clinked their glasses, a solemn moment of remembrance and gratitude passing between them. "To Lochmoor," they echoed, their voices a quiet vow to honor the past while embracing the future. As the stars began to appear, they sat by the shore, sharing stories of their adventures and dreams, their laughter carrying across the water. The shadows that had once haunted the loch were long gone, replaced by the gentle presence of 5 friends who had faced the darkness and emerged into the light. In that moment, they knew that they had left a piece of themselves in this place, and that Lochmoor Academy would forever be a part of them. The legacy they had built would live on, not just in the walls of the academy, but in the hearts of those who would come after them, drawn to the beauty and mystery of a place that had once been shadowed by fear, but now stood as a testament to resilience, courage, and friendship. And as they parted ways, each carrying with them the memories of a time that had shaped their lives, they knew that no matter where they went, they would always carry Lochmoor with them, a reminder of the darkness they had overcome and the light they had brought to a place once shrouded in secrets. They walked away, 5 silhouettes fading into the night, bound by the legacy of a place that had tested them, strengthened them, and ultimately set them free. And as they left the loch behind, its waters calm and still, they knew that they had finally laid its ghosts to rest. Final chapter, Echoes of Lochmoor. As the years went on, Lochmoor Academy became a place known not for its dark secrets, but for its rich history and the resilience of those who had faced its shadows. Evelyn's book was adopted into the curriculum, giving future students a glimpse into the mysterious past of the academy, now treated as a lesson in courage and morality. The stories of the Order of the Loch and the creatures bound beneath its waters became cautionary tales, spoken of with reverence and respect. Lochmoor blossomed, attracting students from all over the world, just as it always had, but this time for the right reasons. They came to experience the academy's beauty, to walk the mist-shrouded paths, and to learn in an environment that had become a beacon of hope and transformation. Lochmoor was still a place of prestige, but it now carried a legacy of integrity and strength, a reputation as solid as the stones that had built it. The founding 5, Evelyn, Liam, Nico, Akira, and Isabella, visited whenever they could, their connection to Lochmoor as deep as ever. Each of them found success in their own right, but they remained close, their bond an unbreakable testament to what they had endured together. 20 years later, on the 20th anniversary of the Order's dissolution, Lochmoor held a celebration, inviting alumni, staff, and students to honor the Academy's storied past. The once abandoned chapel had been renovated into a community space, filled with light and warmth. A plaque hung on the wall, engraved with the words, "In memory of those who faced the darkness and brought forth the light." Below it was a dedication to Evelyn, Liam, Nico, Akira, and Isabella, forever immortalized as Lochmoor's protectors. Evelyn stood beside the plaque, tracing her fingers over the engraving, a soft smile on her face. Time had aged them all, but she still felt the same spark she had felt the first time she had walked through the mist to confront the mysteries of Loch Drummond. Her heart was filled with pride, not only for what they had accomplished, but for the legacy they had created for the generations that followed. "Do you think they'll remember us?" Nico asked, standing beside her, his hands in his pockets, his eyes taking in the room around them. "They already do," Evelyn replied. "Lochmoor has a way of holding on to its stories. We're part of it now, woven into its history, as much as the stones in the loch itself." Akira joined them, her face reflecting a quiet contentment. "We may be part of the past, but what we did changed the future, and that's all any of us could have hoped for." Liam and Isabella approached, each holding a glass of wine, their faces beaming with the joy of reunion. Together, they raised their glasses once more, honoring the academy, each other, and the journey that had brought them together. "To Lochmoor," Liam said, his voice filled with emotion. "To the mysteries we uncovered, the friends we made, and the lives we saved." "To Lochmoor," they echoed, their voices carrying a sense of finality, as if this moment was the closure they had been seeking for so many years. As the celebration continued, they wandered the Academy's grounds, retracing the paths they had once taken as young, curious students. They walked by the loch, where the water was calm and untroubled, reflecting the starlit sky above. The creatures they had once feared were gone, their presence a distant memory, and the loch itself had become a place of peace. In the silence of the night, Evelyn felt a sense of gratitude wash over her. Lochmoor had given them challenges. It had tested them in ways they could never have imagined, but it had also given them a gift, their friendship, their courage, and the strength to face any darkness. They stayed by the loch for a while, lost in their own thoughts, letting the memories rise and fade like the gentle ripples on the water. And in that moment, they knew that Lochmoor had come full circle, its story forever changed by 5 friends who had dared to challenge the shadows, and in doing so, had brought light to a place once consumed by darkness. As they left the loch one last time, Evelyn turned back, her eyes lingering on the calm, serene waters. The past was behind them, but Lochmoor would always be with them, a silent, steadfast reminder of what they had faced and the legacy they had created. They had not only survived, they had thrived, and the future, just like the loch, lay open and still, waiting for the next chapter of Lochmoor's story to unfold. Final chapter. Echoes of Lochmoor. As the years went on, Lochmoor Academy became a place known not for its dark secrets, but for its rich history and the resilience of those who had faced its shadows. Evelyn's book was adopted into the curriculum, giving future students a glimpse into the mysterious past of the Academy, now treated as a lesson in courage and morality. The stories of the Order of the Loch and the creatures bound beneath its waters became cautionary tales, spoken of with reverence and respect. Lochmoor blossomed, attracting students from all over the world, just as it always had, but this time for the right reasons. They came to experience the Academy's beauty, to walk the mist-shrouded paths, and to learn in an environment that had become a beacon of hope and transformation. Lochmoor was still a place of prestige, but it now carried a legacy of integrity and strength, a reputation as solid as the stones that had built it. The founding five, Evelyn, Liam, Nico, Akira, and Isabella, visited whenever they could, their connection to Lochmoor as deep as ever. Each of them found success in their own right, but they remained close, their bond an unbreakable testament to what they had endured together. 20 years later. On the 20th anniversary of the Order's dissolution, Lochmoor held a celebration, inviting alumni, staff, and students to honor the Academy's storied past. The once abandoned chapel had been renovated into a community space, filled with light and warmth. A plaque hung on the wall, engraved with the words, "In memory of those who faced the darkness and brought forth the light." Below it was a dedication to Evelyn, Liam, Nico, Akira, and Isabella, forever immortalized as Lochmoor's protectors. Evelyn stood beside the plaque, tracing her fingers over the engraving, a soft smile on her face. Time had aged them all, but she still felt the same spark she had felt the first time she had walked through the mist to confront the mysteries of Loch Drummond. Her heart was filled with pride, not only for what they had accomplished, but for the legacy they had created for the generations that followed. "Do you think they'll remember us?" Nico asked, standing beside her, his hands in his pockets, his eyes taking in the room around them. "They already do," Evelyn replied. "Lochmoor has a way of holding on to its stories. We're part of it now, woven into its history, as much as the stones and the loch itself." Akira joined them, her face reflecting a quiet contentment. "We may be part of the past, but what we did changed the future. And that's all any of us could have hoped for." Liam and Isabella approached, each holding a glass of wine, their faces beaming with the joy of reunion. Together, they raised their glasses once more, honoring the Academy, each other, and the journey that had brought them together. "To Lochmoor," Liam said, his voice filled with emotion. "To the mysteries we uncovered, the friends we made, and the lives we saved." "To Lochmoor," they echoed, their voices carrying a sense of finality, as if this moment was the closure they had been seeking for so many years. As the celebration continued, they wandered the Academy's grounds, retracing the paths they had once taken as young, curious students. They walked by the loch, where the water was calm and untroubled, reflecting the starlit sky above. The creatures they had once feared were gone, their presence a distant memory, and the loch itself had become a place of peace. In the silence of the night, Evelyn felt a sense of gratitude wash over her. Lochmoor had given them challenges. It had tested them in ways they could never have imagined, but it had also given them a gift: their friendship, their courage, and the strength to face any darkness. They stayed by the loch for a while, lost in their own thoughts, letting the memories rise and fade like the gentle ripples on the water. And in that moment, they knew that Lochmoor had come full circle, its story forever changed by five friends who had dared to challenge the shadows, and in doing so, had brought light to a place once consumed by darkness. As they left the loch one last time, Evelyn turned back, her eyes lingering on the calm, serene waters. The past was behind them, but Lochmoor would always be with them, a silent, steadfast reminder of what they had faced and the legacy they had created. They had not only survived, they had thrived. And the future, just like the loch, lay open and still, waiting for the next chapter of Lochmoor's story to unfold.